welcome. I'm Tiffany Wong, and here's what happened this week. Former Taipei Mayor Wen-je has been released on bail after a hearing that lasted into the early hours of Friday morning. The one-time presidential hopeful has been charged with bribery and mishandling of political funds, and prosecutors are seeking a prison sentence of close to 30 years. Walking free for the first time in 4 months, former Taipei Mayor Wen-je heads home with a smile on his face after spending most of his corruption investigation held incommunicado. He was visibly emotional as he addressed supporters outside his home, maintaining his innocence after prosecutors officially charged him with acts of corruption.
有时候感谢上苍给我这个机会，可以反省一下自己的人生，你知道吗？我还是相信我自己不是那种什么图利啦、贪污啦、会违法的人嘛。但是会遇到这种风风雨雨，你知道吗？表示我们人生还是有地方要检讨。
Ke is implicated in a corruption scandal involving a land redevelopment project when he was mayor. He's also been charged with misusing political funds during his failed run for president this year. 4 others charged in the case were offered bail on Friday, including Ke's former deputy mayor and the head of a company in charge of the development project in question. Their combined bail is over $3 million. Ke is the most high-profile figure in the case. A crowd outside the courthouse erupted in cheers early Friday morning when the judge struck down the prosecutor's request to extend his detention. Leading members of the party he founded, the Taiwan People's Party, were also there.
我们从来没有放弃过，但是我要拜托大家一件事，我们接下来还有更辛苦的仗要打，请大家一定要记得一件事，这不是只是为了阿北个人，这是为了我们深爱的土地，为了台湾的民主，为了台湾的法治。 我们会一直跟阿北走下去，永远不会放弃。
Ke supporters have called the charges a political attack by the ruling Democratic Progressive Party to shut down the TPP as a rising third party. The party plays a vital swing role in the legislature, and Ke ran strongly in this year's presidential election. The trial is expected to last months, and if found guilty, Ke faces a potential 28.5 years in prison if the prosecutors get their way. But his release, even if temporary, is a welcome relief to his family, party, and supporters. Fua Hong and Tiffany Wong for TaiwanPlus. For more on how the case against Ke and his co-defendants may play out, Chris Gorin spoke to attorney Colin Wu from the law firm Lin & Partners.
So prosecutors have charged Wen-je with a number of crimes related to corruption. But what exactly is Ke being accused of here?
Based on the press release from the Taipei District Prosecutor's Office. So the accusation against Mr. Ke can be divided into, I would say, 3 major areas. So the first will be Mr. Ke is accused of accepting 2 bribes in the amount of 2.1 million and 15 million NT dollars. That is in terms of the floor area incentive for the Jinhua City project. They increased the floor area ratio for the core Pacific project to 840%, meaning that a taller building can be constructed. And the second one would be the embezzlement of 6 million NT dollars political donations from the Taiwan People's Parties. The alleged purpose for the portrait rights and the payment of salaries to the Muke employees and the investment in other companies. Muke is a company that is formed by Mr. Ke, I believe. The third major area will be the misuse of the 8 million funds from the Wong Foundation to pay the salaries for the personnel involved in election-related activities. So I think another thing worth mentioning is that Ms. Ke pleaded not guilty during the investigation stage and also the detention hearing in the Taipei District Court.
Prosecutors have recommended a sentence of more than 28 years if he's convicted of all of these crimes. That seems like quite a lot for white-collar crimes. Is this typical of this kind of case?
So the 28 years is like an accumulation of all the accusation brought by the prosecutor. And typically, the court will not accept such a high sentence So that is kind of I think just a suggestion from the prosecutor, and the court has no obligation to follow such sentence suggestions, especially for former government officials. Typically, the court will, if Mr. Ko is found guilty, so the court will issue or render a relatively, I would say, a longer period of sentence against the former government officials.
Typically, how long does one of these cases take? Do you expect this to wrap up before the next local elections in 2 years?
I don't think so, because in my, like, in the sense of the judges, like the practice of Taiwanese court, I don't think that the court will like take into the legislation election into consideration where rendering the judgment. So it will all depend on the progress of this case, such as whether how many witnesses will be subpoenaed during the hearings. So the more witnesses subpoenaed, the longer the trial will be.
That was Chris Gorin speaking with attorney Colin Wu. Taiwan's presidential office has finished hosting its first war games simulating a civil defense response to a Chinese invasion. The exercise was designed to identify holes in response mechanisms and demonstrate how best to mobilize civilians. Rhys Ayers reports.
Taiwan is practicing how it would lead a civilian response to an attack on the country, and for the first time, the presidential office is involved. Bringing together ministries, officials, and private observers, the office staged 3 hours of exercises simulating military escalations between China and Taiwan that role-played how civil society would respond, civil society being citizens and non-governmental organizations. The exercises focused on situations where China used grey zone warfare and where Taiwan is on the verge of conflict. The key takeaways: how to train and actually mobilize civilians, how to best manage resources and protect or repair critical infrastructure and communication and financial institutions, and medical and evacuation procedures. The war games also identify weaknesses in response mechanisms. Those participating in the war games weren't allowed to prepare responses in advance, better simulating a real conflict scenario. It all comes at a time of increased threats from China, with several large military drills around Taiwan just this year. Naturally, the military will be on the front line of any invasion, but President Lai is really driving home how important a whole nation response is to a possible invasion to avoid panic and total societal collapse. An analyst TaiwanPlus spoke to earlier says the exercises could serve a secondary purpose too, a message to Beijing that Taiwan is ready and considering every possible eventuality.
If there's a Taiwan contingency, then it's not only for the jobs of the military, but also for the whole society. It's also a sign of the deterrence, because China knows that the whole society is ready for that, and then it will raise up the cost of the using force.
The issue of defense and China is still heavily contentious in Taiwanese politics and among the public. And through his heavily publicized Civil Defense Committee, Lai is hoping to unite the nation in the face of increasing threats from Beijing. Hank Xu and Rhys Ayers in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
After the exercises wrapped up, President Lai held a press conference announcing the restructuring of Taiwan's civil defense drills for next year.
将完全以不依赖国军资源的方式，参考国际最新的经验来设计，跟汉光演习能够有所区隔，而又能够相互支援呼应，验证民防、灾防体系执行保护国人行动的能力。
Lai stressed the role of civilians in Taiwan's defense resilience and preparedness. The presidential office's tabletop exercises revealed gaps in interagency communication and coordination. This comes shortly after Taiwan's legislature passed controversial amendments that could reduce the country's defense budget by over $2.4 billion. The Defense Ministry has declined to give TaiwanPlus further explanation as to why some of its most critical weapons were deployed within public view, a move some say is a security risk. Hameo Khan reports.
These Taiwanese Navy personnel are part of a special unit known as the Haifeng Brigade. They're tasked with one core mission: destroying enemy ships. And by carrying missiles in massive trucks, they're able to deploy almost anywhere in the country. Earlier this year, TaiwanPlus got a chance to see one of the brigades in action as they conducted a simulated defense of a port against pretend Chinese ships.
近年来，更从固定阵地转型为机动飞弹车组，并挂载了雄风3型反舰飞弹。
Established in the 1980s, the Haifeng Missile Brigade has seen a surge in investment in recent years, spurred by the military pressure from China, which has the world's largest navy and threatens to invade Taiwan. Analysts here in Taiwan say that the Haifeng Brigade is a core part of Taiwan's asymmetric strategy, leaning more on missiles to offset the costs of expensive warships.
因为台湾的资源 resources 比较有限。 所以就不能采取传统海军的这个做法。那所以在这种情况下，台湾作为一个防卫者，就是有足够的飞弹的话，就可以阻止中国的两栖登陆。那当然就可以让台湾有很高的机会可以防卫成功了。
The Haifeng Brigade was deployed multiple times during several of China's recent large military exercises around the country, giving the public a glimpse of one of the country's most secretive weapon systems. Critics argue that the public display poses a security risk, as the weapons are repeatedly deployed in the same location and are easily trackable due to their size.
There is a huge convoy that's that attract attentions and everyone know where it is. The bigger the convoy, of course, the higher the profile that they are. You can bet that a remote sensing satellite, a Chinese remote sensing satellite from space, take a photo, they can see easily on a highway.
A Chinese company has already used dozens of pictures uploaded by Taiwanese media to map out what they suspect are the system's transportation routes and where they would be stationed. Taiwan's defense ministry has said that during wartime, there would be many places they could be deployed.
我们主要现在就着重在于这个在战力保存的阶段，要着重于信息管理。那我们要部署的战术位置也不是只有一个。
Analysts from Taiwan's government-backed think tank argue that in an actual conflict, this massive convoy, which includes the radar, a command center, and the missiles, would never be in the same place at the same time.
大概是3个 module， 3个模组。 所以他要去一个就是 set up 一个 position， 其实很快，就不会像现在就是可能看到你在一个停车场就会就是容易看到它，在真正战时的时候，它这3个 module 会分开的。
While Taiwan navigates how to correctly use and deploy its new systems, the Navy has plans to expand the Haifeng Brigade across the country. While the brigade's weapons seem necessary for Taiwan's defense, it remains unclear if the military has nailed down the tactics necessary to use them effectively. Andy Shrey and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's main stock index, the TAIEX, gained nearly 30% in 2024, outperforming all other Asian markets. The major growth is credited largely to investment in technologies used in artificial intelligence, especially semiconductors. 90% of the world's most advanced chips are made in Taiwan. South Korea's Kospi saw the worst performance in the region, losing about 8%. Taiwanese chip giant TSMC's first factory in Japan has started mass-producing advanced semiconductors. The chips use 12 to 28 nanometer processes and will mainly be used in image sensors and cars. The fab in Kumamoto is part of Japan's plan to strengthen its domestic supply chain, supporting local companies like Sony. Construction of a second factory is scheduled to start at the beginning of next year. Thank you for watching. Here's what happened. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Before we go, check out these 2 rare golden tigers at Chiang Mai Night Safari. The 3-year-old twin sisters have taken social media by storm after their June debut. I'm Tiffany Wong. Take care and see you next time.